Chapter 1451. Zhenhua waved him off, and said, I'm fine. It's a pity that I failed on the cusp of success. He raised the piece of metal in his hand for Tang Wuling to examine as he spoke. There was four-colored light revolving over the surface of the metal, and it was also releasing a layer of golden light, creating a spectacular sight to behold. Furthermore, Tang Wuling could clearly sense that the life force energy imbued within this piece of metal far exceeded that of his soul-refined metals. Tang Wuling asked, is this not already a success? I can sense that it's already become very powerful. Zhenhua shook his head in response. It's not that easy to complete heavenly refinement, due to the fact that this heavenly refinement was attempted using 4 types of elements. It has to withstand 4 bolts of tribulation lightning. Only after withstanding all 4 bolts of lightning will it be able to undergo the final solidification process. The light that you're seeing now is the power bestowed upon the metal by the first 3 bolts of tribulation. But without that undergoing the solidification process, it can't make full use of this power. It'll only receive some enhancements. The most difficult part of heavenly refinement is the final tribulation, transcendence. Having failed to transcend the tribulation, this piece of metal can only be referred to as a faux heavenly refined metal, and that'll severely lower its price. Of course, it can still be used in a suit of 4-word battle armor, but the effect will be far inferior. Zhenhua was feeling quite awkward as he explained these things to Tang Wuling. He was feeling very good today, and he could sense that there was a very good chance of success. However, in order to win over Tang Wuling, he had significantly exerted himself by completing soul refinement with a single hammer blow. As a result, he was unable to withstand the final bolt of tribulation lightning. Tang Wuling asked, during the tribulation transcendence, it seemed to me like you were assisting the piece of metal with your power. Were you protecting it during its tribulation transcendence? Zhenhua nodded in response. Spirit refinement bestows life, soul refinement bestows intelligence, and heavenly refinement bestows ability. During this process, the metal is like a child going through stages of growth, so it needs to be protected and cherished by us blacksmiths. During the tribulation transcendence process, we actually have to bear the brunt of the tribulation lightning's power. At the same time, we have to ensure that the power of the tribulation lightning is absorbed by the metal in a slow and steady process. Otherwise, there's no way that it would be able to transcend the tribulation on its own. This is why a divine blacksmith has to be a titled Douluo. Not only is heavenly refinement extremely taxing on the blacksmith, how can one possibly expect to withstand this tribulation lightning without sufficient power? Truth be told, this is also the most difficult problem that you'll have to face. Tribulation lightning is very damaging to us, and it could severely impact our bodies if we're not careful. During each heavenly refinement, my body is damaged to a certain extent, and this is why my cultivation rank has remained stagnant after I became a titled Douluo. You'll definitely fare much better in this regard as your physical constitution is far more powerful than mine. On top of that, you earned your cultivation rank through arduous cultivation, so I have great confidence in you. Now then, did you feel anything from watching my heavenly refinement? Tang Wuling nodded in response. I did, but I'll need to try it for myself. Zhenhua nodded, and said, failure is inevitable when one first begins attempting heavenly refinement. I failed over 1,000 times before I finally succeeded the first time, and even then, your grand teacher praised me as a superb prodigy. The most important thing is to not rush things or allow frustration to set in. If that happens, there's no way you'll be able to succeed. Yes, Uncle Teacher. Tang Wuling replied in a respectful manner. Zhenhua smiled, and said, all right, it's your turn now. Remember, during the heart refinement process, you have to fully communicate with the metal that you're forging. Only then will the final heavenly refinement process be more harmonious. The tribulation lightning is very damaging to the metal, so you have to make it understand that you're doing this for its benefit. Otherwise, if it begins to resist the tribulation lightning, then the heavenly refinement will inevitably fail. Thus, Zhenhua disclosed a series of fine details and things to be careful of during heavenly refinement in a patient manner, and Tang Wuling listened with rapt focus. Every single step and detail had to be perfect to ensure successful heavenly refinement. All right, that's about it. Give it a try, and don't be disheartened if you fail. The key is to experience the process. I'll help you draw upon the power of the elements. The most basic heavenly refinement requires the incorporation of 4 different types of elements, and the greater the amount of elements you inject into the metal, the higher the caliber of the finished product after successful completion of heavenly refinement. After the tribulation transcendence, there's one final step, which is molding. During that step, we have to alter the characteristics of the piece of metal according to the requirements of the one who commissioned its refinement, thereby giving form to the piece of divine grade metal. After watching Zhenhua's demonstration and hearing his explanation, Tang Wuling was raring to go. This heavenly platform was undoubtedly the ideal place for heavenly refinement, and his uncle teacher was a perfect mentor to guide him through this process. It had taken his uncle teacher over 1,000 attempts to finally succeed, but he had to try his best to beat this mark. There were so many things that he had to do, so it was best for him to make this breakthrough as early as possible. He took a deep breath and strode over to the forging bench, then closed his eyes to completely calm himself. This was his first attempt at heavenly refinement, and the first thing that he had to do was concentrate. After that, he had to assess every single aspect about the piece of metal that he was about to forge. Zhenhua was standing beside Tang Wuling, and he could feel Tang Wuling's blood essence fluctuations gradually become more gentle while his aura also became more condensed. He couldn't help but nod with approval. This disciple of his was truly an exceptional talent. Back when he had first attempted heavenly refinement, he was already a middle-aged man, so it was extremely remarkable that Tang Wuling could be so steadfast and composed at such a young age. It had taken him over 6 years and over 1,000 attempts to finally become a divine blacksmith, and only he was aware of just how painful that process had been. He firmly believed that with Tang Wuling's aptitude, it definitely wouldn't take him that long. As for exactly how long it was going to take, that would depend on his learning ability and how much effort he put in. The happiest and most unforgettable day of Zhenhua's life was the day when he had successfully completed heavenly refinement for the very first time. Now, the happiest thing for him was to nurture another divine blacksmith as his successor. Even though he was a divine blacksmith, he had a rather unstable foundation due to the excessive consumption of spirit items to enhance his cultivation rank. During these past few years, his success rate in heavenly refinement had been steadily decreasing, and this was a direct result of his physical condition gradually worsening due to the waves of tribulation lightning he had endured. As such, he had already significantly decreased his own heavenly refinement workload so his body could recover. It was also exactly because of this that he wanted Tang Wuling to take over from him as soon as possible. Only when led by a divine blacksmith would the Blacksmith Association be considered a first-rate organization on the continent and continue to receive the same amount of resources as it currently did. Just as these thoughts were flashing through his mind, Tang Wuling sprang into action. He opened his eyes and reached out with his right hand, drawing a piece of metal onto the forging bench from a nearby shelf. Zhenhua was quite amused to see this piece of metal. This disciple of his really did have a thing for heavy silver. Indeed, Tang Wuling had chosen heavy silver again, just as he had for his first attempts in spirit refinement and soul refinement. In order to better experience the process of heavenly refinement, he had only chosen heavy silver rather than attempt to create an alloy, thereby lowering the relative difficulty. Zhenhua almost never used heavy silver for heavenly refinement as it simply wasn't worth completing heavenly refinement on a metal of that caliber, but Tang Wuling had always had a special bond with heavy silver ever since he had first begun his forging journey. As such, he had chosen it almost without any hesitation for his first heavenly refinement attempt. He raised both hands in unison, and his soul refined heavy silver hammers appeared in his grasp. The forging bench was activated, and the piece of heavy silver began to calcine. He brandished his heavy silver hammers in a well-rehearsed manner, and he felt as if he could hear the hammers cheering joyfully. Chapter 1452. The red-hot piece of heavy silver rose up, and Tang Wuling sent his hammers crashing down like a pair of shooting stars. Boom, boom. 2 loud booms rang out in unison, and Zhenhua could clearly hear a dull dragon's roar erupt from Tang Wuling's body. Faint golden light began to radiate from his spine, then traveled along his arms, through his hammers, and finally into the piece of heavy silver. Following the pair of resounding booms, a burst of silver light erupted from the piece of heavy silver, rising up to over 10 feet. First grade 1,000 refinement. Tang Wuling hadn't completed 1,000 refinement with a single hammer blow, and he had used his hammer-stacked hammers effect, but there still weren't many saint blacksmiths who could replicate what he had just done. This was a demonstration of Tang Wuling's exemplary mastery of forging techniques, and Zhenhua smiled upon seeing this. With his sharp discerning eye as a divine blacksmith, he was immediately able to identify that Tang Wuling had worked extremely hard in this regard and had improved significantly compared to last time. It was clear that he hadn't slacked off in his forging since they had last met. The soul refinement for all of the suits of 3-word battle armor for his friends had been completed by him, and they were all soul refined alloys of the highest quality. So aside from cultivation, forging was the activity that he had spent the most time on. In terms of soul refinement success rate, even Zhenhua may not be able to compare with him. After all, he had far too much of an advantage in his powers and strength. Silver light rose up alongside a faint dragon's roar, and Tang Wuling took a deep breath as he raised his hammers again. His eyes became even clearer, and a strange quality crept into his aura. Zhenhua's body shuddered slightly as he could sense that the air around Tang Wuling had taken on a slightly warped and illusionary appearance, which was a sign of spiritual power being released outward. What immense spiritual power! Zhenhua's heart was full of praise toward Tang Wuling, but also a slight hint of envy. Aside from soul power, spiritual power was the most important measure of a soul master's abilities, and the higher the caliber of a soul master, the more important spiritual power became as it was the basis for further improvement. On top of that, applications for spiritual power were extremely broad, and the higher the rank of a blacksmith, the more spiritual power was required to sense the minute changes within a piece of metal. Tang Wuling's hammers fell again, but on this occasion, they fell a lot lighter. Tang Wuling was only using the power of his wrist to tap the hammers onto the piece of heavy silver at a high frequency, creating a pleasant rhythm akin to that of rain falling upon a banana leaf. During this process, the piece of heavy silver was also buzzing incessantly as if it were reciprocating his forging. Zhenhua's smile became even more pronounced upon seeing this. Tang Wuling had clearly already grasped the essence of forging, and nothing was more pleasing than this for him to see. Amid the string of crisp clangs, the light glowing from the piece of heavy silver receded, and a layer of faint silver light appeared over the surface of the metal, within which there seemed to be a freely roaming dragon. Spirit refinement was complete. Having just undergone spirit refinement, the piece of heavy silver was like a small infant, buzzing incessantly while shimmering with captivating silver light. Tang Wuling's hammers continued to fall without pause, varying in power and rhythm, and a layer of white light began to rise up over his body as he began to inject his soul power into the piece of heavy silver. His dense soul power seemed to possess substantial form, and the white light glowed brighter with each passing hammer blow. Soul power was guided into the piece of metal with every strike, causing minute changes to take place within it. If Zhenhua's soul refinement had been a stunning meteorite crashing down to earth, then Tang Wuling's soul refinement could be likened to gentle rain. It wasn't spectacular or grandiose, but it was slowly and steadily enhancing and nourishing the piece of metal, gradually bringing out its intelligence. What incredible soul power! As expected, his soul power has already surpassed mine. This was the power of a tidal Douluo who had reached this level through cultivation. Zhenhua's heart was full of praise, and he was appraising Tang Wuling's forging as if he were inspecting a piece of artwork. It was quite clear to him that regardless of how the heavenly refinement went, Tang Wuling was definitely going to succeed in his soul refinement, and it was going to be a soul refinement of a very high caliber. Even though only one piece of metal was being used, he was very pleased by the incredible consistency that Tang Wuling was displaying. If another blacksmith would have reached Tang Wuling's level at his age, then they would definitely employ some more fancy techniques in their forging, but Tang Wuling hadn't done that. His soul refinement prioritized success rate above all else, and his forging was completely free from even the slightest error. Tang Wuling had already created many records in the blacksmith world, one of which was that he was the only blacksmith to reach the spirit domain realm. As such, even Zhenhua had no idea how much this level of spiritual power was assisting in his forging, but judging from the current situation, it definitely had an incredible effect on his soul refinement. As Tang Wuling continued to tap the piece of heavy silver, he was constantly injecting his spiritual power into the metal, so there was absolutely no chance of failure. His spiritual power was simply too immense. It had an exceptional effect on awakening the piece of metal, particularly when it was heavy silver, a type of metal that he was all too familiar with. The light shimmering from the piece of heavy silver became brighter and brighter, and the faint dragon's roar also gradually became louder. Most intriguing of all, the dragon projection within the silver light was also becoming clearer and clearer, and even its scales had become visible. Tang Wuling's soul refinement took 15 minutes, far longer than Zhenhua had, but when he struck the final hammer blow, a delightful dragon's roar immediately rang out. The piece of heavy silver rose up into the air, and the small dragon that was revolving around it turned a faint golden color. It seemed to be full of intelligence as it traversed through the piece of metal and occasionally flew over to Tang Wuling, expressing a strong sense of intimacy. The soul refinement was complete. 20 minutes had passed since Tang Wuling had begun forging, and Zhenhua could sense that Tang Wuling was still in peak condition, as if he hadn't expended any energy at all. His energy and stamina were truly astounding. Tang Wuling paused here as he silently recalled the observations that he had made while watching Zhenhua's heavenly refinement. Zhenhua didn't disrupt him. This was his first heavenly refinement, so there was no need to consider success or failure. The most important thing was for him to accrue experience and find a path to heavenly refinement instead of being led astray. As such, it was a good thing that Tang Wuling was taking things slowly to experience the process. Heavenly refinement was like a soul master's martial soul awakening. The standard to decide if one could become a soul master was whether they could awaken soul power. The process of heavenly refinement bestowed upon a piece of metal true ability, and a suit of four-word battle armor was so powerful precisely because all of the metals that it was constructed by possessed powerful abilities. When combined as one and enhanced by soul circuits, a suit of four-word battle armor was superior to even a divine grade mecha, and it could virtually double the power of a limit Douluo. If it weren't for the invention of battle armor, soul beasts wouldn't have been pushed toward extinction at such a rapid rate. As such, suits of four-word battle armor were extremely valuable, and heavenly refinement was the key to constructing such suits of battle armor. It was once said that four-word battle armor shouldn't exist in the human world, that it was something that should only exist in the divine realm. Whenever Tang Wuling was ready, Zhenhua would activate the heavenly platform again to draw upon the power of heaven and earth. During the heavenly refinement process, he would be able to experience the changes in the laws of heaven and earth, and this was the most difficult process. It took Zhenhua over a year just to learn to make use of the power of heaven and earth, and at the time, he had already become the undisputed number one talent in the blacksmith world. Right at this moment, Tang Wuling suddenly opened his eyes, and golden light shimmered within his pupils as all types of elements began to converge toward him from all sides. Water, fire, earth, wind, these four types of elements entered the heavenly platform first before revolving around the forging bench. Zhenhua faltered slightly upon seeing this. He hadn't even activated the heavenly platform yet. How had the power of heaven and earth arrived on its own? Could it be that Tang Wuling had drawn upon this power on his own? Immediately thereafter, he was greeted by the sight of a massive pink flower blooming behind Tang Wuling. The quantity of all of the different types of elements in the air immediately increased drastically. On top of that, faint traces of gold, black, and silver had appeared, indicating that the elements of light, darkness, and space had also been drawn upon alongside the existing four elements. There were 7 types of elements present all at once. Chapter 1453. Zhenhua was astonished to see this. Incorporating 7 types of elements was basically the limit of heavenly refinement. During his forging career, he had completed 7 elemental heavenly refinement very few times, and he would always be severely wounded during the process. He opened his mouth to stop Tang Wuling, but decided against saying anything in the end. Only by truly experiencing these things could the most effective lessons be taught. On top of that, this was the heavenly platform, and he was present to protect Tang Wuling, so his safety was assured. How exactly had he managed to draw upon so much power of heaven and earth? At this point, Zhenhua was in no hurry to activate the heavenly platform. A sufficient amount of elements had already been gathered, and the greater the amount of elements gathered, the greater the impact on the piece of metal during heavenly refinement, and the more fearsome the tribulation lightning would be, devouring heaven and earth. With this powerful soul skill, there was no need for Tang Wuling to rely on the heavenly platform to draw upon the power of heaven and earth for him. He was the son of nature and one who had been chosen by the plane, so his affinity with nature was far greater than anyone could imagine. The planar ruler couldn't directly assist him, but could grant him the greatest level of affinity with the entire plane. As his cultivation rank progressed, this effect became more and more pronounced. At this moment, Tang Wuling had his eyes closed as he experienced all of the elemental fluctuations around him. There was gentle water, scorching fire, sprightly wind, heavy earth, holy light, mysterious darkness, and unpredictable space. All of these elements were parts of the laws of heaven and earth, and they were the building blocks of this entire world. These were the purest elements, and they brought the purest power. During the past few years, Tang Wuling had experienced far too many things. In particular, he had encountered his godly father on several occasions, so his understanding of the laws of heaven and earth far surpassed that of the average person. These experiences were all extremely precious, and they really shone through at a time like this. The power of heaven and earth was gathered and absorbed, but as opposed to directly injecting it into the metal as Zhenhua had done, Tang Wuling was guiding this power into himself. Devouring heaven and earth could enhance his powers to a great extent, yet as the 7-colored rainbow light surged into his body, he didn't directly absorb it. Instead, he guided them toward his heavy silver hammers, which quickly took on a rainbow hue. He then raised them up into the air before sending them crashing down toward the newly soul-refined piece of heavy silver. Boom! the entire heavenly platform trembled slightly from the impact, and the heavy silver instantly turned a rainbow color. Instead of using Zhen Hua's method of forging, he was using a method that was relatively easier for him to control. Heavenly refinement was different for everyone, so he had to find his own path, and the path that he devised was to absorb and inject the power of heaven and earth into the metal through his devouring heaven and earth. This was something that he had already thought of while watching Zhen Hua's heavenly refinement, but he had to put it into practice to verify its feasibility. The most important part of heavenly refinement was to grasp the laws of heaven and earth, then graft this interpretation of the laws of heaven and earth onto the metal to bestow upon it its ability. To put it in simpler terms, heavenly refinement involved injecting the power of heaven and earth into a piece of metal, then sealing that power using tribulation lightning. It was naturally far easier said than done to complete this process, and an in-depth understanding of the laws of heaven and earth was imperative. Tang Wuolin had many unique and incomparable advantages in this regard. He was the son of nature and the one chosen by the plane. During his cultivation, the instances during which he had used his power as the son of nature, and that one occasion where he had used the blood god array, he had received many opportunities to experience the laws of heaven and earth. On top of that, he was at the spirit domain realm, so his understanding of the elements was also virtually unmatched. Perhaps other limit Douluos would also possess these abilities, but there were no limit Douluos who were also master blacksmiths, and their affinity with the power of heaven and earth couldn't compare with that of the son of nature. Tang Wuolin was very familiar with forging as he had become a blacksmith at a very young age, and he had a very deep understanding of the internal structure, special characteristics, and even the emotions of all types of metals. As such, the first feeling that he was struck by was that heavenly refinement didn't seem to be as difficult as his uncle teacher had made it sound. At the very least, the injection of elements had been very smoothly completed. He had drawn upon the power of heaven and earth using his devouring heaven and earth, then used his own body to transmit this power into his hammers. Tang Wuolin could clearly sense that the piece of soul-refined heavy silver possessed a certain type of suction force, allowing it to naturally fuse with the elements that he was directing into it. Under his conscious control, the elements began to leave a series of marks within the metal, each of which was extremely minute, resembling a series of tiny circuits. As a result, the internal structure of the metal began to transform as part of an evolutionary process. So this was what heavenly refinement felt like. As expected, only by truly experiencing it could he understand just how unique this experience was. Even as Tang Wuolin was marveling at this process, he didn't dare to let any complacency set in and continued with his injection of elements. Soon, he could sense that the tiny elemental marks within the internal structure of the piece of heavy silver was reaching full saturation, and he began to decrease the rate at which the elements were being injected. At the same time, it occurred to him that different types of metals were most likely able to withstand different amounts of elements. Heavy silver was one of more of the ordinary types of uncommon metals, so its capacity didn't seem to be very large. However, he had gathered a considerable amount of elements, and after a brief moment of contemplation, he decided to keep all of them in his heavy silver hammers. From Zhen Hua's perspective, the piece of soul-refined heavy silver had already turned a rainbow color, but immediately thereafter, his heavy silver hammers also adopted the same hue, indicating that they were actively absorbing elemental power. Zhen Hua opened his mouth to say something, but decided against it in the end. Distracting a blacksmith during heavenly refinement could result in dire consequences. As such, even though he was very displeased with Tang Wuolin's overambitious actions, he caught himself before he could say anything. If he wanted to scold Tang Wuolin, then he would have to wait until after the failure of his heavenly refinement. The hammers were also made from soul-refined heavy silver, but different pieces of metals that were soul-refined at different times were bound to have massive fundamental differences, even if they were the same type of metal and refined by the same blacksmith. As such, it was downright absurd that he was attempting heavenly refinement on both his hammers and the piece of heavy silver that he was forging. This was even more difficult than the alloy heavenly refinement he had attempted earlier, so how could he not be angry? However, Zhen Hua's anger was also intermingled with astonishment as the power of heaven and earth that Tang Wuolin had gathered had outstripped even what he had managed to gather with the assistance of the heavenly platform. The 7 types of elements were constantly flowing into his body, and he was handling them seemingly without any difficulty. This was the power of the son of nature. If a normal person were to guide so many different types of elements into their own body at such large quantities, they could easily go into deviation or even self-detonate from triggering an elemental storm. Chapter 1454. However, Tang Wuolin was the son of nature, so all of these natural elements were injecting themselves into his body as gently as they could to prevent harming him. As such, he was able to draw upon them with his devouring heaven and earth to his heart's content. All of a sudden, a peculiar buzzing sound rang out from within the piece of metal. Tang Wuolin had been completely focused on his hammers and the piece of heavy silver this entire time, so he immediately detected that when the metal was entirely filled with elemental marks, these marks began to resonate with one another as if they had been instantly awakened, thereby producing a special type of energy fluctuations. Even Tang Wuolin himself didn't know what type of energy fluctuations this was, but he could clearly sense that as soon as it appeared, the air around him changed. The elements that he had gathered suddenly became very violent, as if they had suffered an unforgivable ordeal, and immediately thereafter, rainbow clouds began to form overhead. The tribulation clouds had arrived. Compared to the tribulation clouds that Zhen Hua had gathered earlier, these clouds covered a far larger area, and the overwhelming pressure they were giving off struck one with a sense of asphyxiation. Tang Wuolin was rather astonished by this, but he wasn't flustered in the slightest. Zhen Hua had told him earlier that a blacksmith had to withstand a lightning tribulation together with the metal that they were forging. This type of elemental tribulation was extremely beneficial to the metal, and it could bestow upon a metal true ability. Only by transcending this tribulation could the elemental power injected into the metal be truly stabilized. But to a soul master, this lightning tribulation was extremely destructive, so extreme caution had to be exercised. If he couldn't withstand the lightning, then he had to retreat right away and accept failure. Otherwise, it was very likely that irreversible damage would be caused. Rumble. 3 bolts of rainbow lightning descended from the heavens, crashing down toward Tang Wuolin's hammers and that piece of soul-refined heavy silver. Tang Wuolin immediately encircled his arms in front of himself, releasing a burst of gentle soul power to protect the 3 pieces of metal. The 3 bolts of lightning struck, and each of them was slightly less powerful than the tribulation lightning that Zhen Hua had attracted, but the 3 of them combined were naturally far more powerful than any single bolt of tribulation lightning that Zhen Hua had to withstand. In the instant that the tribulation lightning struck, Tang Wuolin could feel 7 types of elements exploding all at once. What was even more terrifying was that the elements enhanced one another to further increase the power of the explosion. In particular, the clashes between water and fire, as well as light and darkness, instantly released energy fluctuations that were several times more powerful, and Tang Wuolin felt his entire body instantly go numb as the power of the lightning coursed through his veins. A large portion of this power was filtered by his body while the rest was injected into the 3 pieces of metal. Golden patterns appeared over his skin as he unleashed his golden dragon body, and the vast majority of the rainbow lightning was kept out by his dragon's repulse. Tang Wuolin shuddered as the electrical currents ran through his entire body, but the numbing sensation quickly faded as his dragon core thumped violently to pump out scorching blood essence. It was very difficult for Tang Wuolin to continue to improve the power of his blood essence, but to his surprise, it began to undergo a change in response to the stimulation from the lightning. Could he use this lightning tribulation to help him refine his body? Thankfully, Zhen Hua didn't know what he was thinking. Otherwise, he would definitely be left feeling very dejected. Elemental tribulations were often referred to as divine blacksmith killers, as at least half of the divine blacksmiths in history had perished to these tribulations. This was why Zhen Hua had said that it was very difficult for divine blacksmiths to continue to complete heavenly refinement in their old age after their bodies were past their prime. Zhen Hua was feeling very anxious as Tang Wuolin was struck by the 3 bolts of tribulation lightning at once, but much to his astonishment, Tang Wuolin only shuddered slightly before instantly recovering as if he had only received a minor jolt. Thus, the first wave of the lightning tribulation was transcended. Even though Zhen Hua was very displeased by his decision to heavenly refine 3 pieces of metal at once, his heart was currently filled with elation. If he could withstand 3 bolts of tribulation lightning at once, then there was a good chance that he would be able to complete heavenly refinement on 1 piece of metal while incorporating only 4 types of elements. This first experience would merely serve as a lesson to him. Failure wasn't something to be afraid of. The key was to learn through failure. With his physical tolerance, it shouldn't be an issue for him to retreat before the lightning tribulation became too fierce to handle. However, right at this moment, something unexpected happened. A series of bluish purple vines suddenly erupted out of his body as if he were a blossoming flower. Each and every one of these vines was filled with an aura of extreme excitement, and as soon as they emerged, they sprang eagerly up into the air, giving even Tang Wuolin himself quite a fright. This was none other than his infernal lightning vine, and there was nothing in this world that loved lightning more than the infernal lightning vine. Furthermore, the lightning formed by this elemental tribulation was completely different from normal lightning and was far more powerful. To the infernal lightning vine, this was like a rare delicacy. Tang Wuolin had previously considered using the infernal lightning vine to nullify a part of the tribulation lightning's power, but he hadn't expected it to burst out of his body completely out of his control, and he could sense the intense yearning within it. Boom. Right at this moment, the second wave of rainbow lightning fell. The infernal lightning vine instantly formed a massive net to capture all 3 bolts of lightning, and all of the vines immediately took on a rainbow color from the influx of lightning, save some for the heavy silver. Tang Wuling hurriedly instructed in his heart. The infernal lightning vine wiggled in a reluctant manner, then released 3 bolts of weaker rainbow lightning to strike the 3 pieces of metal. With the experience from the first wave of lightning strikes, Tang Wuling was able to instruct the infernal lightning vine to moderate the power of these bolts of lightning so that they were just enough to satisfy the 3 pieces of metal, but not enough to damage them. Zhenhua was completely flabbergasted by this. He had never seen anyone capable of controlling tribulation lighting before. What exactly were those bluish-purple vines? Those definitely weren't his original blue-silver emperor vines. It appeared that the vines had undergone a drastic mutation and were now filled with destructive lightning power. Zhenhua couldn't help but gulp in a completely speechless manner. He had never even heard of something like this happening before, let alone seen this in person. Rumble. The third wave of lightning came crashing down, and it was even more powerful than the second wave. However, it was met by the ecstatic infernal lightning vine, which was thoroughly enjoying this rainbow lightning delicacy. The infernal lightning vine had no physical form. After fusing with Tang Wuling, it had become his soul spirit and integrated itself together with his blue-silver emperor vines. However, during these tribulation lightning strikes, Tang Wuling could clearly sense that his blue-silver emperor was beginning to undergo another mutation. This infernal lightning vine was truly a lover of lightning. It was undoubtedly the case that this mutation was only going to be a good thing. His blue-silver emperor was a control system martial soul, but he had a feeling that after fusing with the infernal lightning vine, it was going to slowly become an assault system martial soul in the future. Rumble. The rainbow lightning was clearly far more powerful than the 4-colored lightning that Zhenhua had triggered earlier, as each wave of lighting was more powerful than the previous one. Tang Wuling could even sense that his 3 pieces of soul-refined metal were trembling in fear. Chapter 1455. He was suddenly struck by an epiphany. It seemed that it was very difficult to complete heavenly refinement with heavy silver, as its ability to withstand tribulation lightning was limited by the caliber of the metal. Even after undergoing soul refinement, it was no wonder that Zhenhua had attempted heavenly refinement with an alloy comprised of 2 different types of metals. He had most likely taken into consideration the tolerance of the metals themselves. This was the value of experience. Zhenhua had divulged a lot of knowledge to him, but there were some things that he neglected to mention, as the best way to learn was through practical experience. During this heavenly refinement process, Tang Wuling had already learned many things. If it weren't for his infernal lightning vine, even he would perhaps be unable to protect these 3 pieces of metal. This tribulation lightning was extremely fearsome, and even his body may not be able to withstand the last few waves. Thankfully, the infernal lightning vine was the most adept devourer of lighting on this continent. With each bolt of lightning that it devoured, the emotion of elation radiating from it became even more pronounced, and it was only sparing the 3 pieces of soul-refined metal some lightning with extreme reluctance. Tang Wuling was still feeling quite numb, but this sensation was being transmitted to him by the infernal lightning vine, and under its stimulation, his blood essence was becoming more and more exuberant. A peculiar thought occurred to Tang Wuling. It seemed that he had unintentionally stumbled upon a new body refinement method. This method wasn't really applicable to anyone else, but it was clearly immensely beneficial to him. This was quite an unexpected yet pleasant surprise. As the 7th thunderclap rang out, the entire heavenly platform was stained a rainbow color, and the fearsome elemental aura threatened to destroy the entire platform. The entire dome had also turned a rainbow color, and everyone near the Blacksmith Association building could see that a vast expanse of rainbow light had suddenly gathered above the building. In the core area of Bright City, there were 2 middle-aged men standing atop a tall building, and one of them couldn't help but sigh at the sight of the rainbow. Is that divine blacksmiths who are completing another heavenly refinement? I wonder if another piece of divine grade metal is going to be created. The other middle-aged man also sighed. If only we could get divine blacksmiths who are to forge a piece of divine grade metal for us. Keep dreaming. All pieces of divine grade metal are worth astronomical prices, and apparently, divine blacksmiths who rarely ever attempts heavenly refinement anymore. The older a divine blacksmith becomes, the more damaging heavenly refinement becomes to their body. There's no other divine blacksmith on the entire planet, so I'd rather see him forge as little as possible. Otherwise, if our continent loses its only divine blacksmith, the heritage will most likely be severed, and who knows how many years it'll take before another divine blacksmith appears. Indeed. It's been over 30 years since Zhenhua became a divine blacksmith, yet no other divine blacksmith has emerged during this time. Is it really that hard to reach that level? You're a 9th rank mecha maker. Surely you know how difficult it is to reach the very top. Heavenly refinement is at least 10 times more difficult than it is to become a 9th rank mecha maker. It's not something that can be achieved purely through cultivation. One must possess an extremely high level of aptitude and experience as well. Having said that, I heard that a young prodigy appeared in the Blacksmith Association a few years ago, and he became the youngest saint blacksmith in history. Perhaps he could become a divine blacksmith in the future. I hope another divine blacksmith emerges soon. Otherwise, with Zhenhua's current age, you and I will most likely never attain suits of 4-word battle armor. I'm certainly not holding my breath. It's hard to say whether we'll even be able to become hyper Douluos. Before reaching that level, there's no point in thinking about 4-word battle armor. Rainbow light shimmered as the 3 pieces of metal transformed into liquid before drifting into Tang Wuling's hands. It was as if they had become completely weightless, and there was an indescribable feel to them. He had done it. Neither Zhenhua nor Tang Wuling himself had thought that he would be able to complete heavenly refinement on his first attempt. Due to the fact that success was never considered to be a possible outcome, Tang Wuling hadn't completed the final molding step. However, these 3 pieces of heavy silver were now bona fide pieces of heavenly refined metal, and 7 different types of elements had been incorporated into them. No matter how ordinary heavy silver was, these 3 pieces of metal were now completely extraordinary. Zhenhua stared blankly at Tang Wuling and reflexively murmured, "These are most likely the most powerful pieces of heavy silver in history. Give it a name." All divine grade metals had the right to possess names, and the ones to name them were naturally the divine blacksmiths that had created them. I'll call it rainbow heavy silver. Tang Wuling said with a smile. Zhenhua chuckled. "You lazy little rascal. Fine, we'll call it rainbow heavy silver. You didn't bestow upon the metal shape through the final molding step, and it's too late to do it now. Molding can only be done in the instant that heavenly refinement is completed. Make sure not to neglect this step next time. Molding is very important as it makes the piece of metal conform to the requirements of the user. Molding doesn't just bestow upon a metal shape. Even more importantly, you'll be establishing its energy profile. For example, you're a strength type soul master, so your divine grade metal should be molded accordingly to complement your strength. Molding requires a lot of experience and preparation in advance. Of course, this piece of rainbow heavy silver isn't completely useless. It can be of use to a soul master that excels in control over multiple elements. Upgrading a suit of 3-word battle armor to a suit of 4-word battle armor didn't require direct forging from a blacksmith. Instead, the process involved fusing the suitable divine grade metals into an existing suit of 3-word battle armor. Following the fusion process, core circuits had to be carved out again to complete the final suit of 4-word battle armor. The rarity of suits of 4-word battle armor was a direct result of the rigorous requirements involved in crafting them. Both the divine grade metals and core circuits could only be created after expending a massive amount of mental and physical energy. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face, and he was appraising the rainbow heavy silver in his hand in an extremely pleased manner. He was most likely the first blacksmith to successfully complete heavenly refinement on their first attempt. He wasn't conceited or arrogant. It was just that heavenly refinement simply wasn't all that difficult for him. This was one of the many benefits of being blessed by the plane. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Tang Wuling, and he asked, "Uncle teacher, does this mean that I'm a divine blacksmith now?" Zhenhua faltered slightly upon hearing this. Indeed, the requirement for someone to become a divine blacksmith was to successfully complete heavenly refinement once. Tang Wuling had accomplished this, so he was a divine blacksmith, the youngest divine blacksmith in history. Zhenhua suddenly burst into elated laughter. He finally had a successor. It had been many years since he had been this happy. It was already an immense honor for him to become a divine blacksmith, but it was an even greater honor for him to give rise to another divine blacksmith. Zhenhua's laughter gradually trailed off, and he said, "Technically, you're already a divine blacksmith, but you didn't complete the molding process, so you're still not a divine blacksmith in my eyes. Unless you complete molding on your own and forge 10 pieces of divine grade metal, or the metals required for a full suit of 4-word battle armor, you're not a divine blacksmith in my heart." Tang Wuling's mouth gaped open as he stared at the sly smile on Zhenhua's face. But that's cheating." Zhenhua immediately put on a serious expression and retorted, "What do you mean cheating? I'm setting these high standards for your own good. What do you take a divine blacksmith for? Do you think you can call yourself a true divine blacksmith after just a single lucky success? Focus on forging a suit of 4-word battle armor armor for yourself. You're still not a hyper Douluo yet, but with your physical constitution, you should be able to handle a suit of 4-word battle armor. Tang was rendered completely speechless upon hearing this. If a suit of 4-word battle armor were that easy to forge, then Zhenhe wouldn't have forged only around 10 suits of such armor in his entire lifetime. We'll leave things here for today. Go back and rest for now. We'll continue tomorrow. After each heavenly refinement you complete, make sure to thoroughly reflect and review the experience you accrued. Don't even think about going anywhere before you complete heavenly refinement 10 times. After that, Zhenhe clasped his hands behind his back and promptly departed. Chapter 1456. Tang looked on at Zhenhe's departing figure in a flabbergasted manner. What had happened to basic trust and integrity? Didn't he say that he could leave after successfully completing heavenly refinement once? Why was it suddenly 10 times now? However, a smile appeared on his face almost as soon as Zhenhe turned around. He had already succeeded once, so was 10 more really that difficult to accomplish? It didn't seem so. With his infernal lightning vine, the greatest obstacle, which was the lightning tribulation, was very easy for him to overcome. Thus, all he had to do now was accumulate more experience and experiment with different types of metals and alloys. He had still had much room for improvement, but thankfully, he had finally made the breakthrough. Furthermore, he could sense that his infernal lightning vine was still rather dissatisfied even after devouring a portion of the elemental tribulation. He didn't know what effects this tribulation lightning would have on his infernal lightning vine, but it was definitely going to be a positive one. On top of that, heavenly refinement could also refine his body and allow him to forge divine grade metals. It was an ideal method of cultivation for him. 10 days passed by in a flash, and the day that the entirety of Bright City had been eagerly awaiting finally arrived. Since the early morning, the Bright City Sports Stadium had been completely surrounded, and there were many soldiers maintaining law and order, ensuring that the most important roads leading to the sports stadium were unobstructed. The Spirit Pagoda was most likely the only organization that could hold a Joust for a spouse event of such a massive scale. According to the latest statistics, the number of registrants for the event was already close to 4,000. The prizes on offer were simply far too alluring to miss. On top of that, the Spirit Pagoda had announced 3 days ago that it would be offering a 100,000-year-old soul spirit as Silver Dragon Princess Yuna's dowry. This piece of news was the last straw that broke the camel's back, and the entire Soulmaster world instantly erupted into a frenzy. Generally speaking, all Soul Emperors were above 25 years of age, and those between 25 and 50 comprised the true elite core of the Douluo continent's Soulmaster world. The total number of registrants may have only been 4,000, but one had to realize that these were all Soul Emperors, Soul Sages, Soul Douluos, and even titled Douluos. It could be said that this was the top-tier power of the entire continent. There were even people who had joked that if a Godslayer missile were to be dropped on the Bright City Sports Stadium, then the majority of the Douluo Federation's top-tier power would be eradicated. This was only a joke, but due to the tragedy that had befallen Shrek Academy and the Tang sect, the federal government had made sure to take extensive safety precautions. They were keeping the final Godslayer missile under strict surveillance, and an aircraft squadron, mecha corps, and a huge number of troops had been deployed to Bright City to ensure public safety. Bright City was currently the most populous city on the continent, but it also had the best law and order. Each registrant received an electronic card which contains detailed identification information. The sports stadium was already completely filled with spectators, and the Spirit Pagoda had spared no effort to hold this event, even donating a huge sum of money to the army that was responsible for maintaining law and order in Bright City. It had to be said that the Spirit Pagoda had done an exemplary job promoting the event. Not only had this become a grand event for the entire continent, the stunning prizes that they were offering had significantly improved its reputation. In particular, its status in the Soulmaster world had risen noticeably. The new motto of the Spirit Pagoda was to use Soulmasters and give back to Soulmasters, and their vision was to create a model organization that was a home to all Soulmasters. This drew a stark contrast with its past haughty attitude, making it a lot more relatable to all Soulmasters. As a result, the public image of the Spirit Pagoda was improved significantly, and that drowned out a lot of negative press aimed against it. Under these circumstances, the Dou faction had no way to attack the Spirit Pagoda. After all, this was only a Joust for a spouse, and such lavish prizes were being offered. Due to the sheer number of participants, even the pre-event selection process was scheduled to be completed in 7 days, with around 500 to 600 people undergoing examinations per day. In order to give the spectators a better view of this examination process, all of the large cell apparatus used for the examinations were positioned at the center of the Bright City Sports Stadium, and there were 36 massive screens hanging in front of the spectator stands, providing a live broadcast of the proceedings. At this point, all of the participants due to be examined on the first day had already been gathered in the lobby by the employees of the stadium. Prior to this day, no one knew what the examinations were going to be, so those undergoing the examinations on the first day were at a relative disadvantage. However, according to the Spirit Pagoda, the sequence wouldn't affect the fairness of the entire examination. Beep. A handsome young man strode through an electronic door in a proud manner, and his name was displayed on a screen. Ulunyu of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan. The Soulmasters lined up behind him were quite surprised to see this. The Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon was a top-tier martial soul, even though this Ulunyu appeared to be less than 30 years of age. His cultivation rank definitely wouldn't be too low considering he hailed from the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan. Ulunyu was naturally none other than Tang, and this identity had been prepared for him by the Tang sect. Aside from him, the rest of Shrek's 7 monsters were also participating in the event under different identities. For this event, they had devised a very thorough plan. Tang was selected to be in the first group to be examined, and only those who passed the examination would be able to participate in the rest of the event. Looking at these large cell devices, he couldn't help but recall back to the Shrek Academy enrollment examination. At the time, it had only been him, Yue, Xu Xiaolon, and Shishi. The 4 of them had worked together and completed the examination with flying colors. The moment that he had been accepted into Shrek Academy was the happiest moment of his life. He had never been that happy since the departure of his parents. At the time, Yue had been by his side, yet now, she was the subject for this Joust for a spouse event, the revered Silver Dragon Princess of the Spirit Pagoda, whereas he had become the Tang sect master and Sea God's Pavilion master. Everything had changed during the span of 10 years. Time had stripped them of their innocence and replaced it with pressure. How he wished he could return to his carefree childhood days. He cast his gaze toward the rostrum, and even though it was concealed behind panels of one-way glass, he could still clearly sense that she was there. He reflexively stroked the silver dragon scale hanging in front of his chest, and his eyes became even brighter. All of a sudden, the sky above the sports stadium dimmed as a black barrier appeared over the stadium, making it seem as if night had suddenly descended. Chapter 1457. This sudden change naturally attracted the attention of all of the spectators and contestants. All of a sudden, delightful music began to play, and a beam of light shone down from above to form a huge 3-dimensional projection. The projection depicted the scene of Silver Dragon Princess Yuna walking through the desert, and a burst of deafening cheers immediately rang out. The scene continued to unfold and transition, and in the instant that Yuna rose up from the valley to clash with the devastating fireball, the cheers in the venue instantly crescendoed to a peak. Welcome to the Bright City Sports Stadium. A pleasant male voice rang out, and at the same time, the noise reduction soul tools were activated, causing the commotion in the sports stadium to die down noticeably. I'm sure all of you are here today with the common objective of winning the ultimate prize. Without further ado, please give a round of applause to the star of the event, Silver Dragon Princess Yuna. Raucous cheers and applause rang out again, and even the noise reduction equipment was struggling to repress the commotion. All of the spectators present were here to see what Yuna looked like in person. No competition had ever managed to gather such a large collection of powerful soul masters, yet the Spirit Pagoda had managed to achieve this. A streak of silver light rose up into the air from the rostrum, and everyone was greeted by the sight of a pair of massive silver dragon wings. A beam of light shone down from above, illuminating the stunning Yuna. She was currently wearing a silver dress which perfectly complemented her long silver hair, giving her the appearance of a silver celestial maiden. Her large purple eyes were clearly visible on the big screen, and much to everyone's surprise, she was even more stunning in person than she was in the promotional videos and images. This was the real Silver Dragon Princess. For some reason, all of the cheering suddenly subsided, as if there was some form of tacit understanding that had been established among all of the spectators, and everyone fell silent to listen to the Silver Dragon Princess's address. Yuna cast her gaze toward the crowd, and her purple eyes seemed to be able to pierce through the entire world. Everyone was struck by the illusion that she was looking directly at them, and even though she was situated at an altitude of over 100 meters, this feeling of being scrutinized still set everyone's hearts aflutter. Tang was also looking up at her from within the crowd, and the arrogance on his face had already vanished. His gaze was very placid, but also very determined. Yue, I'm taking you with me no matter what this time. No one will be able to stop me. Hello everyone, I am Yuna. Yuna's voice was very placid and pleasant, and it wasn't filled with much emotion, but it struck everyone with a special sense of resonance, as well as an impulsive urge to fly over to her side. Welcome to this Joust for a spouse event. I'll be waiting for you in the finals. After that, Yuna extended a slight curtsy toward the competitors down below, then vanished amid a flash of silver light. That was the extent of her address. There was no encouragement offered, nor any attempt made to arouse an emotional response. However, this simple address was enough to set the entire sports stadium alight as everyone's blood was churning in their veins for her. Some people were struck by the urge to conquer her and take her for themselves, while others felt a sense of admiration and reverence. However, all of them were struck by the universal urge to protect and cherish her. At this point, Yuna had already returned to the rostrum. The one seated at the very center of the rostrum was naturally none other than the current Spirit Pagoda chairman, Kyanggyu Dongfeng, while Kyanggyu's Hangting and Yuna sat on either side of him. As soon as Yuna returned, Kyanggyu's Hangting leaned around his grandfather and said, "You're so beautiful, Nana, you're like a queen." His eyes were currently filled with yearning, as if he wanted nothing better than to swallow her whole. Yuna turned to him with a smile and said, "You're being far too generous." Kyangyu's Hangting immediately replied, "No, I'm not. My words simply failed to do you justice. All right, the examinations are about to begin, so I have to get down there as well now. I'm definitely going to make you my wife." Yuna lowered her head as a faint blush appeared on her face, and the flames of yearning in Kyangyu's Hangting's heart were fanned even further. He immediately rose to his feet and bade farewell to his grandfather before departing from the rostrum. Even he had to follow the rules of this event so the Spirit Pagoda wouldn't be accused of rigging the event. Unfortunately for him and Kyangyu Dongfeng, neither of them could see the cold look that had appeared in Yuna's eyes as she lowered her head. Kyangyu Dongfeng smiled and asked, "Are you pleased with this event, Nana?" Yuna nodded in response. "I am, very much so." Kyangyu Dongfeng continued, "Are you really going to offer the product of your latest research as a reward? If you do that, the portion that you receive will be significantly diminished." Yuna smiled and replied, "What's the point in taking so much for myself? It's not like I'm left wanting for anything in the Spirit Pagoda. With so many exceptional young soul masters participating in this event, this is the best platform through which we can advertise the new product. Anyone who uses our product will definitely be hooked, and its best trait is its sustainability. On top of that, this will provide an overall boost to the entire soul master world. Once everyone grows accustomed to using our Spirit Ascension liquid, they'll become even more reliant on our Spirit Pagoda in the future. Even though the status of soul masters has been negatively affected by the advancements in soul technology, soul masters are still the pillars of the Federation, so we have to invest in them in order to reap greater returns in the future." Chang Dongfeng chortled with glee. "Ha ha ha, well said, Nana. You're developing even faster than I imagined you would. You're completely right. We'll do exactly as you say. On top of that, all of the rewards being offered during this event will come from the headquarters, so your portion won't be diluted. After this event, I'm going to pay a visit to the Blacksmith Association and get divine blacksmiths who would have forged suits of four-web battle armor for the two of you no matter the cost." Yuna hurriedly replied, "Thank you for your kindness, Chairman." Kyangyu Dongfeng chuckled. "After this event, you'll be calling me grandfather. I'll arrange your marriage with Tang as soon as possible. With you by your side, it'll become a lot easier for me to gradually pass the torch on to you too." He simply couldn't be more pleased with Yuna. Not only was she an exceptional soul master, she possessed unique talent when it came to soul spirit research. Ever since she had joined the Spirit Pagoda, she had proposed one idea after another, resolving many of the issues that had plagued the Spirit Pagoda for years. On top of that, she had even developed black soul spirits, which had formed the basis for the Spirit Pagoda's rise to become the #1 organization on the entire continent. Recently, she had repeated her efforts and developed a monumental product for the Spirit Pagoda. The Spirit Pagoda was going to announce this new product at the conclusion of this Joust for a Spouse event, and it would be sure to shock the entire soul master world. Kyangyu Dongfeng was very pleased with Yuna's focus on research and development, as this meant that she wouldn't pose a threat to Kyangyu's Hangting inheriting the position of chairman in the future. Of course, once the two of them got married, Yuna would become a part of the Kyangyu family, so it wouldn't really matter. With this exceptional pair of young individuals to inherit the Spirit Pagoda, the future of the Spirit Pagoda was looking extremely bright, and he would finally be able to dedicate all of his efforts to pursue that higher realm. At this point, the examinations had already commenced. The participating soul masters were organized into orderly groups by the workers, then led to the first large soul tool situated at one side of the venue. Another worker's voice then rang out through the loudspeakers. "Attention, all participants. The electronic cards you received earlier will be used to record your examination results. After the completion of each examination, you'll be assigned a score, and those who score totals above 60 will progress to the elimination matches. There will be a total of 10 examinations, and the first one will be the soul power examination. Soul power testing devices were very common, but it was very rare to see such a large one. The advantage of using such a large soul power testing device was that it could provide extremely fast and accurate results. The first soul master strode onto the device, and a white light barrier instantly enveloped his body, then disappeared after about 3 seconds, following which he was asked to step down from the device. The electronic card that he had been assigned would record his soul power rank, but none of the other participants would be made aware of what it was. Chapter 1458. The participants were quite pleased with these privacy measures as no one wanted to expose their soul power ranks prior to the commencement of the elimination matches. Tang was situated slightly ahead of the center of the line, and as he made his way forward, the breathtaking image of Yuna still lingered in his mind. He could sense her, so she definitely also knew that he was here. A faint smile appeared on Tang face. His objective here was very simple. He was going to use this event set up by the Spirit Pagoda against them to officially win the heart of the Silver Dragon Princess. On top of that, he was going to reveal his identity once he won the event and announce to the world that the Silver Dragon Princess had been taken by the Tang sect master. That would undoubtedly deal the Spirit Pagoda an extremely heavy blow, and he would also be able to officially win the affection of the woman of his dreams. He still didn't know why Yuna refused to be with him, but if it were due to the threat posed by the Spirit Pagoda, then he was going to show her that he already possessed the power to protect her. Not only was he the Tang sect master and Sea God's pavilion master, he was a divine blacksmith. From his starting point as a child, he had reached this point in less than 20 years, and he was destined to stand at the pinnacle of the entire continent someday. After discussing this plan with his seniors of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, he had received unanimous support. Shrek Academy had already announced its rebuild, and now it was time for the Tang sect to also make itself heard. The extensive promotional efforts made by the Spirit Pagoda had created the ideal platform, and it was up to the Tang sect to take advantage of it. The attention of the entire Federation was focused on this event, and it was being broadcasted live by all television stations, but it was yet to be seen who would be benefiting from this widespread attention. Just as these thoughts were running through Tang Wulin's mind, the young man in front of him suddenly turned around and asked, "What's your soul power rank, brother? Why are they even testing our soul power? Didn't they already test this when we registered? Could it be that they're going to raise the minimum threshold to beyond rank 60? Tang Wulin shook his head in response. "I'm not sure. It wouldn't be a surprise if they made an adjustment considering the large number of participants." The young man standing before him was of a medium build and was quite handsome. However, his aura was rather indistinct, clearly indicating that he had somehow disguised his own cultivation rank. Tang Wulin could only just barely sense that he was at around rank 60 in soul power at most. The young man smiled and said, "Nice to meet you, brother. My name is Lanfoizy. What's your name?" Tang Wulin also replied with a smile. "My name is Oolongyu." The young man continued, "You still haven't told me what your cultivation rank is, brother." Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly. "That's a secret." Seeing as Tang Wulin wasn't going to answer his question, Lanfoizy merely shrugged and turned back around. Soon, it was his turn to step onto the device. As he did so, light shone down upon him and enveloped his entire body. Several seconds later, the light faded, and Lanfoizy turned around to give Tang Wulin a faint smile before being directed to the next area by a worker. The worker situated in front of the device then made an inviting hand gesture toward Tang Wulin, who also stepped onto the device. Gentle light enveloped his body, and he could sense the minute changes in energy taking place within the device. He could feel soul power gently stimulating his body from all sides, causing his own soul power to react in a certain way. This device clearly took into account all of these reactions to ascertain the soul master's cultivation. Tang Wulin didn't disguise his own soul power rank and allowed the device to conduct the examination as normal. Several seconds later, the electronic chip being worn on his wrist gently vibrated, and he looked down to discover that the number 10 had appeared on the small screen outside the chip. 10 was a perfect score for a single examination, and a minimum of 60 points had to be scored out of 10 examinations for a pass. This system was quite similar to Shrek Academy's enrollment examination. After stepping off the device, Tang Wulin discovered that Lanfoizy was waiting for him not far away, and the latter quickly waved at him. Tang Wulin made his way over to him, and Lanfoizy said in a low voice, "How many points did you get?" Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly, but he still replied, 10. Lanfoizy faltered slightly upon hearing this. 10. That's the same as me. Not bad, brother. Looks like we'll be rivals. He raised the electronic chip on his wrist for Tang Wuling to see as he spoke, and sure enough, it was displaying the number 10. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon seeing this, and he couldn't help but pay more attention to this Lanfoisi character. If one had to be a titled Douluo to receive a perfect score, then did this mean that Lanfoisi was also a titled Douluo? But his aura didn't seem to be that powerful. A smug look appeared on Lanfoisi's face. You've got some secrets, and so do I. Come on, let's move on to the next examination. Tang Wuling smiled in response and made an inviting hand gesture. The second examination also involved a large soul tool, but it was still off, so no one could see what was happening inside it from the outside. This soul tool was far larger than the first one, and was the largest among all of the soul tools in the entire venue. Lanfoisi looked on with a hint of eagerness in his eyes. I wonder what this examination is. Tang Wuling had noticed that 2 people were tested at a time during this examination, and through the use of his spiritual power, he could sense that they were emerging on the other side before moving on to the third examination. Even though there was a huge number of participants, the examinations were very well run, so everything was progressing quite quickly. Soon, it was his and Lanfoisi's turn, and they just so happened to be assigned as a duo. As soon as they made their way into the large soul tool, an electronic voice instantly sounded. This is the speed examination. You'll be passing through the passageway. Try to avoid the attacks from the projections that appear around you as much as possible. There are no patterns to the attacks unleashed by the projections. The less of them you come into contact with, the higher your score, and vice versa. Sure enough, there was a passageway at the center of the soul tool that was around 30 meters long. There was a participant up ahead that was just about to undergo the examination, and both Tang Wuling and Lanfoisi immediately turned their attention toward him. Begin. Following the announcement from the electronic voice, 6 soul rings instantly rose up from beneath the participant's feet, consisting of 2 yellows, 3 purples, and 1 black. This was a very good soul ring configuration, and he immediately launched himself forward. However, he was clearly a strength-type soul master whose speed was rather lackluster, and as soon as he entered the passageway, a series of projections emerged from the walls on either side of him. These were all humanoid projections of light, and they were attacking the participant from all directions and angles. The attacks weren't substantial, but just as the electronic voice had explained, being struck by them would result in score deductions. The soul master did his best to evade the projections, but he was struck by at least a dozen projections in the end. By the time he arrived at the end of the passageway, his expression was already filled with grief. There were only a total of just over 30 projections, so being struck by close to half of them clearly wouldn't yield a very good result. It was naturally Lanfoisi's turn next, and he turned to Tang Wuling with a smile as he said, "Check this out. Chapter 1459. He was jumping up and down as he spoke, as if he were performing a warm-up routine. However, Tang Wuling could sense that the energy fluctuations he was releasing had undergone a change. In contrast with the nondescript energy fluctuations from before, Tang Wuling felt as if he had become an ignited bomb. His soul power was escalating at an alarming rate, and it wasn't just an instantaneous boost. Instead, it was a continuous rapid rise. Even the space around him was beginning to buzz due to the elevation in his soul power. What kind of ability was this? Begin. The electronic voice rang out once again, and Lanfoisi immediately sprang into action. As opposed to soul rings, a faint blue ring of light appeared around his body. The ring of light was riddled with peculiar runes, and his aura suddenly became extremely placid, as if he were a cloud drifting through the air. He wasn't particularly fast, but he seemed to be able to predict the movements of his assailants, controlling his body to evade their attacks before reaching the other side in the blink of an eye. With Tang Wuling's immense spiritual power, he could sense that Lanfoisi had only been struck by 3 projections at most, which was certainly a far better result than the previous participant. However, Lanfoisi was still quite frustrated as he stomped a foot onto the ground. This is way too hard. Instead of immediately departing, he stood on the other side and appraised Tang Wuling with a hint of intrigue in his eyes. He had been struck by 3 projections, giving him a final score of 9, and in his mind, there was no way that Tang Wuling would be able to do better than him. Even though speed wasn't his forte, he was very confident in his own evasive skills. Tang Wuling had proclaimed that he had received a perfect score for the first examination, but he hadn't shown Lanfoisi his electronic chip. This second examination would most likely give Lanfoisi a good indication of whether he was telling the truth. As a potential rival for this event, he really wanted to see how Tang Wuling was going to handle this examination. Tang Wuling made his way to the entrance, and a faint smile appeared on his face as he cast his gaze toward Lanfoisi. Begin. The electronic voice rang out. Immediately thereafter, a layer of bluish-purple lightning suddenly appeared over Tang Wuling's body, following which he began to hurtle through the passageway at an incredible speed. Before Lanfoisi had a chance to react, Tang Wuling had already appeared by his side. However, the keys to success in this examination lay in one's agility and ability to predict enemy attacks. A faster speed couldn't diminish the effects of the projections' attacks. However, Lanfoisi's eyes had completely widened with shock, and he could see that all of the projections around Tang Wuling had warped in his wake. Their attacks were clearly about to strike him, but they were slowed down by this warping effect, thereby allowing Tang Wuling to charge right through them. He immediately made a grab for Tang Wuling's wrist, and Tang Wuling allowed him to do so. The number being displayed on the electronic chip was 10. That's cheating. Lanfoisi exclaimed in an indignant manner. Tang Wuling glanced at him and asked, "How did I cheat?" "You." Lanfoisi suddenly realized that he had no idea how Tang Wuling had cheated. It was clear that the lightning he had released had disrupted the soul tool, but that was a part of his abilities, and there was no rule prohibiting this. His lips twitched slightly as he gave Tang Wuling a thumbs up, then departed from the soul tool. Tang Wuling naturally followed along behind him. Following his departure, tragedy befell the participant behind him. He had witnessed the blitzkrieg tactics that Tang Wuling had employed, and he tried to emulate him. As a result, he became the only one to be struck by all of the projections during this examination. Scoring 0 in a single examination would result in an instantaneous elimination, and through this painful ordeal, he learned that some things shouldn't be emulated. You're ahead of me by 1 point for now, but I'm going to catch up to you no matter what this third examination is. Do you believe me? Lanfoisi said with a competitive gleam in his eyes. "I believe you," Tang Wuling replied with a smile. Lanfoisi felt as if he had punched a bag of cotton. He had prepared a long rambling speech to proclaim his own greatness, but Tang Wuling's nonchalant response left him feeling even more frustrated. Thus, they arrived at the third examination. The soul tool there resembled a stone plaque. Of course, it was constructed from an alloy rather than actual stone. Boom. The participant up ahead was attacking one side of the soul tool. Immediately thereafter, a beam of light sprang up on top of the soul tool, and the final position where it lingered was the final result of the examination. The design of the soul tool was very simplistic with 10 grids, which clearly corresponded with the 10 available points. A strength examination. Lanfoisi faltered slightly upon seeing this, while a smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Lanfoisi turned to look at Tang Wuling to find that he was quite tall and broad, but wasn't all that muscular, and that was quite a relief. The usage of soul power wasn't permitted during this examination as it was a test of pure strength. Why do soul masters like us have to undergo a strength examination? Who even battles using pure strength anymore? Lanfoisi grumbled in a displeased manner, and it was clear that this wasn't his forte. Tang Wuling asked, "Do you still think you'll be able to catch up now?" Lanfoisi replied, "Why not? Are you very strong?" "I'm decent," Tang Wuling replied in a modest manner. Lanfoisi said, "Then we'll see. I'm actually very strong as well. Back when I was a kid, All of a sudden, his voice drew to an abrupt halt, and a hint of wariness flashed through his eyes. Tang Wuling didn't cry any further and nearly looked on as Lanfoisi stepped onto the examination platform. A beam of light immediately shone down upon him. This was to ensure he didn't use any soul power during the examination. Judging from the results received by the participants up ahead, it seemed that strength was no one's forte. After all, once soul masters cultivated to a certain level, who would focus on honing their strength. One's strength would automatically improve through the enhancements in one's physical constitution that resulted from an increase in cultivation rank and soul power. As such, only those with exceptional talent in that area would focus on strength. Lanfoisi stood in front of the soul tool with a look of intense focus on his face. After the electronic voice announced to him to begin, he took a deep breath, and his rather thin body suddenly seemed to have become taller and broader. All of a sudden, he performed a semi-pirouette, then launched his right fist forward, creating a sonic boom as he did so. Boom. Lanfoisi immediately turned around after throwing that punch just in time to see the beam of light stop at the 7th grid. The best result thus far was only a 6, so 7 was quite an outstanding score. He turned to Tang Wuling with a smile, then pointed at the 7th grid before making his way down from the platform. Tang Wuling strode onto the platform in a calm manner. It had been a very, very long time since he had undergone a strength examination, so even he didn't know how strong he currently was. All he knew was that the golden trident weighed around 54,000 kilograms, and he was still able to just barely wield it. Begin. Bam. Tang Wulin's setup was definitely the most simplistic among all of the participants. There was no preparatory routine. He had thrown a simple straight punch as soon as the announcement was made by the electronic voice. The impact wasn't very loud, but the entire soul tool had jumped slightly as a result of his punch. The beam of light instantly shot upward, reaching the top in the blink of an eye before a clear clang rang out. All of the participants behind him were completely stunned. The meter for this soul tool didn't actually conclude at the 10th grid. Instead, the 10th grid was situated at around 2/3 the overall height of the device. The meter was only expanded to include the top portion of the device for strength examinations where the usage of soul power was permitted, and the use of soul power was not permitted on this occasion. So it had been thought that 10 grids were already enough. However, Tang Wulin's punch had sent the beam of light flying up to the very top, as evidenced by that loud clang. Was this guy really a human? All of the workers were looking on in a flabbergasted manner, while Tang Wulin merely looked down at his electronic chip to find the number 10 had been displayed on the screen. Chapter 1460. He had scored 30 points from 10 examinations, but this was nothing to be proud of. After all, there was only a single Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master on this entire planet. Lan Foisey was standing behind the soul tool, but he could still sense that the entire device had jumped slightly. On top of that, Tang Wulin had completed his examination faster than everyone else, and his expression had already changed as he watched Tang Wulin step down from the platform. He was beginning to believe that Tang Wulin had received a perfect score for the first examination now. He had received perfect scores for all 3 examinations thus far. What did this entail? It entailed that he was truly a formidable rival. Receiving a perfect score in one examination could be passed off as luck, but what about 3 in a row? Not bad, brother. He gave Tang Wulin a thumbs up, but his expression had clearly become less enthusiastic. All of the participants were potential rivals in love, and he had originally thought that he would be able to show off to Tang Wulin, but now, he could see that Tang Wulin was a serious rival. Tang Wulin naturally wasn't going to pay any heed to Lan Foisey's newfound animosity. However, he had also developed an interest in Lan Foisey. Tang Wulin had never seen anyone enhance their own soul power as Lan Foisey had done during the second examination. He couldn't describe what type of feeling that was, but such an explosive yet sustained boost in soul power was something that he had definitely never witnessed before. There weren't even any records of this in Shrek Academy. This was not just a simple matter of disguising one's cultivation rank. Instead, it was a very peculiar change in Lan Foisey's soul power. What was that soul power boost you received earlier? It seems to be very rapid yet also sustainable. Is that a secret technique you've cultivated? Tang Wulin asked. A smug look appeared on Lan Foisey's face. That's not a secret technique. It's an innate talent that only those from my family possess. However, a hint of wariness then appeared in his eyes. Why are you asking about something like this? Tang Wulin smiled and replied, I'm just curious. Lan Foisey contemplated the situation for a moment before proposing. You tell me how you cheated during the second examination, and I'll tell you about my ability. Tang Wulin couldn't help but burst into laughter. You have yourself a deal. Tang Wulin continued. My martial soul possesses the power of lightning, which can heavily impact space. As a result, I was able to warp space and distort the projections. Lan Foisey was instantly enlightened upon hearing this. You can do that. But lightning is very difficult to manipulate. Wouldn't it require exceptional control to do this? That's very impressive. This Lan Foisey appeared to be rather straightforward and bullish, but Tang Wulin discovered that he was actually very intelligent. Indeed, without sufficient spiritual power, how would he have been able to control lightning to such a brilliant extent? The explanation he had provided was very simple, but Lan Foisey had still been able to immediately identify the key underlying point, which was quite impressive in itself. Lan Foisey hesitated momentarily before continuing. My ability also stems from my martial soul. I have a special martial soul that allows me to enhance my own soul power using a special method. This is a family secret, so that's all I can disclose to you. Tang Wulin sighed. So you basically told me nothing. Lan Foisey gritted his teeth and said, the only thing I can tell you is turbocharge. You'll know what I mean if we encounter one another in battle during the competition. Turbocharge? A string of thoughts instantly surfaced in Tang Wulin's mind upon hearing this. Did this mean that Lan Foisey was compressing his own soul power to a certain extent in order to produce more power? What kind of martial soul would allow him to do this? Lan Foisey shrugged and said, let's move on to the 4th examination. I'm definitely going to catch up to you. Tang Wulin merely smiled and replied, we'll see about that. The 4th examination was taking place in a spacious area, following the soul power, agility, and strength examinations. Tang Wulin and Lan Foisey had both realized that these were all examinations of one's general skill and abilities. Only those who reached a certain standard would be able to move on to the rest of the competition. The 4th examination seemed to be progressing rather slowly, as indicated by the long line in front of them. Lan Foisey sought out someone who had completed the examination to find that this was a martial soul examination. Looks like you won't be able to hide your martial soul for much longer. Tang Wulin chuckled. Lan Foisey harumphed in response. So what? It's not like they'll know. His voice suddenly trailed off here before he abruptly changed the subject. What's your martial soul? Does it have something to do with lightning? Tang Wulin nodded in response. That's right. Lan Foisey smiled and asked, how many points do you think your martial soul will receive? 10. Tang Wulin replied in a nonchalant manner. You seem really confident. Lan Foisey harumphed, clearly rather displeased by Tang Wulin's show of confidence. A proud look appeared on Tang Wulin's face. My martial soul has already stood at the pinnacle of the continent since as far back as 20,000 years ago. Lan Foisey countered. My martial soul is definitely better than yours. Oh. It was Tang Wulin's turn to be surprised now. He could hear a great deal of confidence in Lan Foisey's voice, and the determined look in his eyes was a further indication of this immense confidence. The martial soul examination process was quite complex as there were 10 judges evaluating the participants' martial souls, and the average score given would be the final score. Only after waiting for around 20 minutes did Lan Foisey's turn arrive. Tang Wulin was standing right behind him, so he was able to see him walking onto the platform. There were many soul tools situated around the platform, and they had clearly been set up to examine multiple aspects of one's martial soul. Tang Wulin had seen similar setups back in Shrek Academy. Please release your martial soul, and we'll give you an overall score. Are you ready? One of the judges asked. Lan Foisey nodded in response. Please begin. Lan Foisey took a deep breath as his eyes suddenly turned blue. This was a very clear and pure blue that resembled that of the ocean. Tang Wulin was standing behind him, so he couldn't see Lan Foisey's eyes, but in that instant, he could sense that Lan Foisey's aura had undergone a change, giving him a sense of unfathomable depth. Immediately thereafter, a series of blue halos was released from his body before revolving around him. The blue halos then began to rotate at a high speed, and Tang Wulin heard the same buzzing sound once again. Lan Foisey's aura was escalating at an astonishing speed, and his soul power was also being drastically enhanced. The rapidly rotating blue halos had already completely concealed his body. The aura that Lan Foisey was currently giving off was comparable to that of a tidal Douluo, and the figures on the surrounding soul tools were flashing violently. From the rate at which the soul tools were pulsating, it was clear that they had been pushed beyond their normal work capacity. That's enough. One of the judges announced. Thanks so much for watching this video.